So welcome everybody to another week of Chat with the Holistic Vets, Dr. Jeff Hyman and Christina Chambro with Gail Pope here as well. Gail runs a wonderful rescue in California called Bright Haven Shelter Rescue that everybody should be supporting. We heard a little bit, Gail, about your online courses that are about to go live, but we'll also talk a little bit about a new rescue kitty that you've got there named Goldie, and hopefully Goldie will be able to join us today. And Christina, any other ideas you want to talk about? I'd like to still, finish with a recap at some point on Austin and Montreal. We left off at natural heartworm prevention and treatment. But why don't we start with any clinical cases? So, Gail, do you want to talk about Goldie, or Christina, do you have other ideas for where we should go with this?
No, we should go. That's fine.
Okay. So, Gail, who's Goldie?
Goldie's been. Am I echoing?
A little bit.
Talking, I'm not sure.
Talking. Goldie came to Bright Haven actually a week ago tomorrow. We do a lot of networking for animal shelters and private people as well, as much as we can, to try and save lives. And we have a great deal of success. And last week, or the week before, we were asked to network a very sad-looking little girl. And part of me thought that somebody would step forward and rescue her. However, nobody did. And every now and again, what can you say? You fall in love on a picture or an intuition, something happens and your heart's taken. So Goldie came to live with me. She's been an interesting journey, and I think it's a possibly interesting journey to discuss as to her healthcare. Goldie, we don't know how old she is. She came in as a stray. She's a golden lion girl. She has a really thick undercoat of almost white, pure white fur, and then it gets gradually golder and golder until it's that rich, deep orange on the outside. They partially shaved her in the shelter because she was so matted she couldn't walk. And we've kind of been gradually finishing off the job. And so now she looks a little bit more like a golden lion. She's the sweetest girl in the world. Her personality is a homeopathic dream. She had, when we were actually doing some more grooming the day before yesterday, we discovered she had foxtails actually embedded in her stomach, and they'd been bleeding around them. And she let us pull them out and work on them and clean everything. What she does the minute you go towards her, you put your hand out, and she literally comes forward and she just, love me, love me. And when you do something she doesn't want to, we pulled blood the other day to get an idea of what we were working with. And it clearly hurt, and she didn't want to do it. So what she does when you do something she doesn't like, she leans forward and she goes, and then she doesn't do anything. She doesn't break the skin. She doesn't bite very hard. She just holds on and then looks at you like, you getting this? Really don't want to do that. If you kind of try to cajole and carry on, she bites just a teensy bit harder and then looks again like, please, can you not get this? So what can you do? I mean, she's just the sweetest girl.
Is she around?
She's in my bathroom. I'll ask Blanca as we carry on talking when she comes in to give it a try. But the first couple of days she was bright and eager, a little bit timid, but very happy to be alive. Obviously, she'd been in a shelter in East LA where the overcrowding is just horrible. And she was actually kept in the medical room. So she was obviously present with many, many, many euthanasia. So she had a really tough emotional journey while she was there. She also has a tumor across her right eye. It's on her right eyelid and it's kind of spread around the side of her eye here. However, after 2 or 3 days of being she's still bright and happy. However, she does not want to come out of the bathroom, and if I carry her out, she's really, really scared, and she just wants to go back in again. So I'll see. The house is really quiet this morning. It may well be that she'll let Blanca just cuddle her and bring her in and introduce her. I'll ask her if she comes in. So here we have Goldie. She's
Actually, Gail, let me interrupt you and ask a question.
yes.
So if you have an animal who first comes from a shelter to you and is outgoing and friendly and then wants to retreat a few days later, do you consider normally if that was happening to an animal who'd normally been outgoing and friendly for a year or two and then wanted to retreat, we'd see it as something negative. But when they're just coming in, do you feel sometimes they have like a few days of abnormally being nice and then retreating because that's more sort of where they are normally? Or how do you see the retreat she's doing in the bathroom right now? Healthy or not healthy?
I don't know her well enough to be completely sure, but I would say probably healthy. She's, it's like, let me take things a little bit more slowly. Blanca, if you can try it in a minute, everybody would like to meet Goldie. So I brought her as far as my bedroom door so far, so this is going to be a big thing for her. So as and where, just
don't push her.
Don't stress her out. I didn't realize. I figured that she'd be happy to.
Well, actually, no. I think if there were just humans in the house, she probably would have explored it. But she has seen that there are other animals here, and they've probably told her that she's not. So she's a big family to get used to.
You at this point, because that brings up a really, really important point. A lot of the rescues that you get, that we get as patients, that they get at the rescue down in Florida, don't really have that all important, or what we think is that all important backstory. We don't know where they come from. We don't know how old they are. We don't know what their history is.
No, it's all about love for now. It's love, some flower essences. We're just letting her take her own time. She is eating amazingly well. Let me turn the computer around.
Fine, but I think that's
Hey, sweet girl. Here's yours. And here's Goldie.
Yes.
Hi. It's all right, baby girl. Yeah, you see, you're fine, aren't you? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, she doesn't look too freaked out. She's
she's trying very hard to be brave. Oh no! Don't let me look over there. Are you listening, my tummy? Here you go. Oh, is he?
How hard are you holding?
Yeah, she's interested. She's
I'm
looking
just
around.
embracing her. It's not really hard. She's resting in my stomach. That's probably why.
So how far are you guys from the bathroom, her safe haven?
Just next door. It's the room next door, and my bedroom's in that closet.
But she's not looking that way. She's not like, oh my gosh, let me back there.
If you put her down, she can go out there or investigate the room, right? Kelly, you also said, Gail, that she has some really, really bad teeth. Thought maybe we should talk a bit about dental care.
Well, okay. Let's go back to our, here we are. We have Goldie. She's, who knows, 10, 12 years old, something like that. The only thing we've done during the first week was to actually run a blood panel to get an idea of what her overall health status was. And her blood work actually is pretty good. She's in very, very early renal. And other than the fact that she's positive for FIV, she's good. Now, obviously, her immune system is going to need some super support, and we already have started working with that with a little bit of extra vitamin C added, because that always seems to help with these FIV people. So with that in mind, and with her settling in, the very first thing I did actually, the day she arrived, I made a telephone call and engaged one of our homeopathic veterinarians, Jeff Levy, to take her on, since he'd recently mentioned that he was sitting waiting for another patient. So I said, wow, perfect, just for you. So here we have her. She's obviously got a tumour. She's obviously got some pretty heavy tartar on her teeth. We haven't given her a really full exam yet. I've got an appointment with Jeff, so in the next couple of days we're going to be taking a good look into that mouth and seeing exactly what's going on in there. She's eating really, really, really well. She's not pouring out her mouth or showing any signs of any immediate need for anything to do with surgery. Plus, that's a very big question we're going to have as we go along. And so, here we are. Once she's settled, we have some decisions to make. We'll obviously take her to a local veterinarian who actually is a homeopath as well. And just have him.
Who is that, Gail?
His name's Kevin Fenton. Do you know him?
Mm-hmm.
He's just a great guy. He's just a wonderful, wonderful man. He actually doesn't practice homeopathy in his veterinary practice locally, but he has a private practice that's very busy. And he's great. I always use him as a backup. I take him in with some of our old fogies who there's no way we can consider doing surgery or anything, and just have him back me up with a second opinion. It's always good to know you're doing the right thing. And so I should be taking Goldie in hopefully next week and just see what Kevin thinks, because obviously we have the oncology question. We have, is this a squamous cell? She also has, I don't know, you probably weren't able to see it, she has some telltale marks on her nose. So we could be dealing with something that's benign. We could be dealing with something that's malignant or aggressive. So little by little, step by step, obviously she's eating really well, she feels good. And so classical homeopathy is going to certainly be our direction for the immediate future. So now I'm going to pass it over to the two experts and see what you think so far.
So yeah, my first question to both you guys is, how do you make that decision about dental care to rescue? I mean, I think we'd all agree that natural diet and good prophylaxis, good prevention is, it's more effective than coming in, when they're older and their teeth are rotting away. But Christina, what do you recommend at this point, assuming that she's got moderate dental disease, maybe a little gingivitis associated with the FIV and the immune dysfunction? What are your thoughts about doing a full dentistry or not on a case like that?
Oh, well, definitely not. She's eating, as Gail's repeated several times. So that's an important point, Gail, to make that. Is the fact that she's eating, it doesn't really matter what her teeth look like at this point. You're not going to sedate this cat, and you're not going to stress this cat by doing non-anesthesia dentistry at this point because it's not causing an issue. I might add in CoQ10 because that's good for the gums and easy to give. So I'd look at treating the gums that way. But I would be waiting really just until I could figure out the remedy that's needed at this point. And then, of course, I would also recommend that everybody who, Gail sort of does this on her own, but although she sometimes uses outside help, but for any time you rescue an animal, I would set up a session with an animal intuitive, because as you said, Jeff, we don't know what their problems were and what their history was, what their background was, and how things affected them or didn't affect them. So I think it'd be important to have an animal intuitive check in. And some intuitives can do body scans and look for places where there's energy blockages, and others talk, more hear what the animal wants to tell them from an emotional state. And of course, like everything, there's no truth. So it's not something that you go 100% on what they say any more than you go 100% on what you're intuiting, or 100% even on what you're observing. Because sometimes what may look like bad gums, in 5 days of tender loving care, the gums are better because it was more stress related than vital force gum related. So that would be my next steps.
It's interesting you say that. My intuition tells me that it's possible that it's just a story that comes into my mind, just having spent time with her. I think that she was obviously very, very well loved. I see her with an elderly person, probably a lady, since she responds so beautifully to women. It's possible that her owner died, and who knows, the fact she ran away, the family let her out, neighbors, she's been out. She had what looked like thick black, like engine oil all down her back, around the back of her neck and her shoulders. and burrs. And I mean, I've never ever seen a cat that is so matted as she actually is. Pretty cute now.
It looks beautiful now that she's all shaved down. But you mentioned she has a good appetite. Have you tried chicken necks? At
the moment, I'm just letting her go slowly. And well, I posted on Facebook the very first day that we had her. Incidentally, just before I forget, going back to what Christina said, bearing my intuition in mind, I've also sent her photograph to the intuitive that we work with, just saying, okay, tell me more. She's a wonderful medical intuitive, as well as can chat away to them as well. So she's
fantastic. Her name is?
Her name's July Berrin. She's in England, and she's just a naturally gifted intuitive. She really is an astonishing person. She's really, really busy, so sometimes it's difficult to get hold of her, but I've sent her an email, and we'll wait and see what she has to say. I'm sorry, I was going to answer something else. What was the other thing?
I was just wondering about your experience with exposing these guys to chicken eggs.
Oh, yes, that's
right. Any raw bone that you can hold and they can chew on.
I think that's a really good idea, particularly while she's still in the bathroom, because none of my other animals, they either haven't got teeth, they haven't got a strong enough mouth, or they have absolutely no clue what to do with it. So it's a while since I've tried chicken necks, but I think they do her good. For the moment, she's eating a bone-in diet, and her stools are really, really good, and she's coming on. But I think I should probably go get her some chicken necks, because it might be a good time to start working with that. Just, with these healthier gums are going to make a huge difference to her.
Yeah, it's definitely very important to engage those muscles in the mouth and get her to work more and get her, if she can get, like you said, the bone-in chicken or chicken necks, that's going to
really... the way she dived into, the day she arrived, I thought she'd had a long drive from the shelter to get to us. She came out of the carrier and gave her a little while, and everybody's kind of talking. And so I said, I think I'm just going to get her something to eat, and we'll shut the door and let her be peaceful. So I dished her up some canned food, a nice, high-quality canned food, thinking, well, I guess she probably ate kibble or canned in the shelter, so this is where we better start. When I came back, she hadn't touched it. So I sat and tried to cajole her, and she would smell it and kind of just like, well. And then I went off to get food for the other animals, and I thought, you know what, I'll just try this. So I brought her a plate of just straight raw diet, and I popped it down, and I put the two plates right in front of her, and she kind of leant forward to the canned food again, like, oh, gee. And then she leant forward, and she kind of went, what? And that was it. So it's almost like, if she was living in the wild, she may have been catching her own prey. We don't know. But the way she dived into that is something that, to a cat that's been brought up on kibble or canned food, they don't generally react in quite that way. So I think she may have been killing her own food in the wild, perhaps. She certainly recognized what she should be eating, that's for sure. And her eyes are already, the eye where her tumor is actually much clearer already. And the texture of her fur is softening. We haven't bathed her yet, but the texture of her fur is really starting to soften up. So once, we've always found that once you can switch an animal, and we would never normally do it that fast, normally, particularly with, she's not really elderly, I don't think. I guess she's on her way, but I would have still chosen to transfer her diet slowly. But I don't know what she was ever eating before, so I really had no option. And so she doesn't seem to be having any ill effects, which is great.
That's actually a good point in general, that people often ask, how should I transition? Should I transition my dog or cat slowly or rapidly? A woman who sold Oma's Pride raw food and ran a kennel club in Westminster, Maryland for probably 30 years. She always recommended 1/4 a week. So it would take a month to transition them onto raw food. And she said 100% of the time it worked. Now, this was with dogs. I say, give it to them right off the bat. As soon as you decide you want to switch to a fresh food diet or a raw food diet, just start. Give them a hunk of raw meat. Give them some pureed vegetables. See what happens. If the dog or cat likes it and then does well, doesn't seem to have too much in the way of stool problems, they may change a little bit, be a little softer, a little harder, a little smaller. Often they're smaller. Then you're fine, and just go ahead and start working on the fresh food diet. If they do vomit or don't eat it, then you need to go more slowly and find different ways to integrate them into it. But I love like what you did, Gail. Just go ahead and start them with it and not worry about slow transitions.
Yeah, I tend to be more conservative, and it will depend on the individual. If they come with a history of vomiting, diarrhea, other GI problems, I usually say, do it gradually. I don't know about taking weeks and weeks to do it, because I usually like to get them onto a fresh food or raw food diet before they get their first homeopathic medicine, and I prefer not to wait weeks and weeks before doing that. That being said, that I tend to be more conservative. I'd say a good third of my clients that I say go slowly with the food transition, a good third of them jump within a day or two to a totally raw diet. They're just amazed they can do it. Their dogs and cats love it. And I say 98% of them don't have a problem. And of course, the ones that do have a problem are usually the ones that already have a GI, inflammatory or imbalanced focus. And you'll learn that more when you know the individual, as far as what's in the history. Is there colitis or other GI or vomiting issues? So yes, I guess I agree with you both that gradual is good, but I personally, if you ask me off camera, I'd say just do it. Just jump in and do it. You can always back up from there if necessary. And that's it.
Very good. Okay. What do we want to? We wanted to do. Was it heartworm and also Rosemary's vaccine? Did we talked about that study yet? Rosemary Manziano's.
Actually, we didn't get there, but I would love to start with the natural heartworm. And since Dr. Falconer talked about Rosemary's study in the heartworm talk, I think now would be a great time to bring that up as well. So I'm going to pull up the proceedings. So if you want to start.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you want to start and just summarize what Will talked about, what the purpose of the talk was. So I'm going to have to find it.
Well, I've got my spiel down so much, I'm not sure that I remember details of what Will had. I don't have the
general broad terms. There was basically
okay. So the bottom line, and I just, as anytime I speak about heartworm preventative, I put it in quotes because it's not really a preventative, it's a morning after pill. So that's the first thing people need to know, how their dogs get heartworms and how the quote preventative works before they ask me the question, should I give it every month? Once you understand how the cycle works, then you change your, then you change the questions that you ask. So first off is a mosquito has to be born. So if it's too cold, they're not going to be born. Now, when I was a veterinarian in DC and a new graduate, and there were no heartworm cases in DC back in the 80s, and we had cold winters back in the 80s, and in the winter, when I said to give heartworm prevention and to start it in the winter and to give it year round, people would ask me, well, why? There are no mosquitoes. And I'd say, well, sometimes we have warm days and I've seen a mosquito or two fly around. That was back in my conventional days. And but here's the truth. The mosquito does have to be warm enough to be born. But then that mosquito has to live long enough to find a infected dog that has adult heartworms that have produced babies, microfilaria, that are in the bloodstream. so that when the mosquito bites that dog, it picks up a load of these infective larvae. Then, and this is critically important and something I did not learn in veterinary school, multiple studies have shown that the temperature needs to remain at 65 degrees Fahrenheit or above. And there are a few different temperatures, but around that, for 2 weeks in order for the heartworm larvae to complete its several larval changes ending up in the salivary glands of the mosquito. So if you're in the winter, you're going to have a month of warm weather in order to get your dog even possibly infected. Maybe 3 weeks, you know, if you really push it, but it really is going to take a while. And then once the mosquito bites, then the mosquito has to find your dog. And when it bites your dog, the larvae are in the salivary glands. So as the mosquito bites and the saliva drips, the heartworm larvae come onto the skin of your dog. Now, they have to find that hole to crawl through it. They can't come in through the intact skin, which is a really good defense mechanism. And then it goes through up to 6 months of crawling around in your dog's body, muscles and blood vessels and, you know, tendons, ligaments, all of that, fat tissue, to get to the heart. And it goes through different larval changes as it does that. So what the heartworm, quote, preventative, unquote, does is it kills those migrating larvae. Now, if your dog is healthy, the natural immune system will absolutely kill the migrating larvae. So my push is to get your animal healthy, and then you won't need to give the heartworm, quote, preventative. Now, if you do, so we always look with anything at effectiveness, need for it, effectiveness, and problems with it. So the heartworm medication is very effective. I don't know that very many animals, like with vaccines, a number of animals come down with the disease. With heartworm preventative, it's pretty effective. Occasionally something breaks, but usually it's effective. Can it cause harm? I personally, in my practice of 35 years, have only seen one dog that seemed to be affected negatively by the heartworm preventative. And that dog was a little dog and would tear up rocks, dig up the garden, pull up these huge rocks. And we finally narrowed it down with case taking to the fact that it was caused by the heartworm prevention. And when we changed heartworm prevention, the dog stopped digging up rocks. I mean, this was a Boston Terrier that was digging up a 10-pound rock kind of thing. He just worked and worked at it. It was amazing. So people who want to give it, I don't push a ton against giving it. I certainly say it's absolutely fine with me to not give it. I don't think it's needed. But if you want to, you wait until you've had a month of, or at least 2 weeks of the temperature being above 65 degrees 100% of the time, and then get a blood test, and then give your first dose. Most of these heartworm medications are good for 6 to 2 to even 3 months, 6 weeks to 2 months to even 3 months. So give the heartworm the second one 6 to 8 weeks later, and then the third one is probably all you'll need to give. So 3 doses rather than 12 doses. I don't feel the heartworm nosode is particularly effective. I don't like giving nosodes on a regular basis. That's a homeopathic medicine that's made from, I believe it's the heartworm and the blood from a heartworm infected dog. And a lot of people ascribe it 100% effectiveness, but in my practice, all the people who are not giving heartworm preventative, out of all of them, which is probably 50% of my practice over 35 years, only one time have I, only one family with 2 dogs, those 2 dogs came down with heartworm, and that was it. And with no treatment at all except constitutional homeopathic prescribing, the dogs recovered completely and became heartworm negative. So even if they do get adult heartworms and have a positive test, most of the time, at least 80 to 90% of the time, they can be treated with various different holistic approaches and do not need the conventional medicines.
Well,
Jeff?
Well, no, you pretty much summed up.
Because I got to plug in
everything. when it comes to heartworm prevention, treatment, and actually I think for most chronic and many diseases, I was referring actually just more specifically to Will's approach. I put a couple of quotes from his talk in the chat box, and I think he hit on, in that last quote, a very, very, very important topic, which is, that here's a problem that affects the heart. The heart is, near and dear to all of us emotionally, physically, in every way. So we are prone to be easily cajoled, easily told that, while these poisons are the only way that you can prevent disease. And the reality is, just like you said, Christina, just like, well, we're not safe for an hour, and we've all had the experience that the very best way to prevent and treat heartworm is to maximize health through diet, exercise, mental, physical stimulation, homeopathic prescribing, which really just means working with the body, not against it. I mean, homeopathy is one of the only ways, and certainly, one of the best codified methods of doing that. And frequently, as we're seeing with the heartworm cases throughout the country, whether it's the endemic regions, the popular regions of heartworm, such as Florida or Texas and Hawaii, both which are where Will practice. No matter how much heartworm is really out there, you don't necessarily need the strong drugs to prevent and treat it. And then that brings up the other issue of what you were talking about, Christina, which is that everything's it's a risk-benefit balance. What is the risk that they're going to get sick from the heartworm medicine? Probably not that great. I mean, I've also, like you, have only seen a couple that really had a bad reaction. And we can almost always predict in advance when you don't want to use that medicine or any other medicine, and that is if the dog or the cat, usually dogs, because I don't know about you, but I don't use heartworm.
Oh no, yeah, no cats. I'm sure Gail gives heartworm prevention to all of her cats.
I'm curious, actually, to know what Will does. I mean, does he purely recommend good food, healthy living, immune support as the preventative, or does he have his own formula of?
No protocol that I can see. I did.
Okay. He wasn't doing the nosodes. I can't remember.
I buy and download. Okay. He's got an ebook on heartworm prevention and treatment, and as far as I can see, it's just all the basic good, healthy tenets that we talk about every week, that we talk about with the clients every day, that we try to practice every day. And no protocol, no drugs. But I don't want.
So then I think anything more on that one? Because I'm very excited about Rosemary's approach and hope that I want to find out if she's done anything with cats.
The only other thing I want to mention that I was mentioning before is that it is a risk-benefit ratio, whether it's HeartGuard or any other medication or any other treatment. If you read the medical books, How Doctors Think, or Groupman, any of Groupman's books, and you'll see that at least half of what we're being told by MDs and specialists alike is not backed up by any experience, and it's often just propaganda that's pushed on us by salespeople. Think carefully.
And we need to answer Judy's question, which is, Jeff and I are not saying to give heartworm preventative. what we're saying is, if you feel that the risk of heartworm and heartworm disease is strong enough, you're worried enough about it, you've got the concern showing in Dr. Falconer's talk, that it just really bothers you and concerns you, that we don't see a lot of damage from the heartworm preventative. So if it's given rationally and given a few times, then we don't see that there's a big problem with that. But we are not recommending it. If you don't want to use it, great. But unlike vaccines, where I really don't want you to do vaccines, no, 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 no. And I will work with people to get them not doing vaccines, because we see damage from vaccines. Heartworm preventative just doesn't show up as being that bad of a thing. Now, it's bad for the environment. It definitely is shed. It's hard to get. You can't get just a heartworm preventative anymore. It's got all sorts of other crap in it. So if we can limit it to a few doses a year, that's better. But definitely, no, I'm not recommending it. Now, having gone on and okay, go ahead, Jeff. Anything more with heartworm?
Judy, no, definitely not recommending it, like Christina said. But what we are recommending is that if you are going to use it, just do it mindfully. Know what it's doing. Number one, know it's not preventative. And number two, to understand that you probably can achieve 90% effectiveness by just giving a few doses, even though I think the drug companies now say once a month, year-round, for whatever reason that is. I usually recommend that if you are going to be doing it in this area, you probably don't need to start till the end of June, like around now, early July, because the throwback is going to be at least June, May, and maybe before. Adriana, one of our colleagues in Austin, said she was actually in the room when HeartGuard was first presented to the world. And the Cornell researchers found that actually the throwback period, and throwback period is how long it works. If you give it one day, how many months it protects against before that date. She said they actually said it was 4 months.
Now that would be for ivermectin, which is in HeartGuard. So that was why I said up to 3, 6 weeks to 3 months.
5 months
4
months. Interceptor.
5 months on Interceptor. So, but the bottom line is we're not saying to give it, we're saying build the health, but not to worry too much about it. But vaccines, I just got some good news from a group. Oh gosh, let's see if I can pull up what their name was. The group is the Pet Welfare Alliance. And the Pet Welfare Alliance is from your original country, Gail. It's from the UK. It's from England. And they're working very, very hard to eliminate vaccine problems and over-vaccinating in England and around the world. And do you know about them, the Pet Welfare Alliance?
I will.
Well, look them up. Look them up, my dear. And just got a newsletter from them today that said in the UK, some regulatory body, I didn't dig in to figure out what the name of it was, because I don't know them over there. But some regulatory body said that kennels may accept titers for the core vaccinations instead of mandatory requirement of vaccinations in order to be kenneled.
Wow.
So that's excellent. Now, unfortunately and interestingly, the one exception that was made was a vaccine that we don't consider core here in the United States, but they were still requiring leptospirosis. Who knows why? It's a very ineffective vaccination because it's a bacteria. But that's very good news that that's happening. And so I just posted that on my Facebook page. So anybody can go to my Facebook Healthy Animal Vet and see that and get that link. So that was really good news. I was excited about that. So that's 2 in this year, because earlier this year we got the thing in the US with the AVMA saying that with rabies, you don't need to do quarantine or euthanasia if an animal with expired rabies vaccine is bitten by a suspicious animal. So, we're getting, there's actually some small improvements happening. We're excited about that.
And, I think the biggest improvements that we're seeing over here in the US that I can see almost every day is coming from a grassroots movement. The more you guys learn, the more you understand, the more you question, the more kennels there are going to be in this area. Like Judy, where, Judy has this great facility where you don't need to vaccinate. And many of the, except for rabies, is required by law. But many of the kennels, even the staunch vaccine advocates, will accept titers.
Right.
Just have to ask. They won't tell you in advance. But if you ask them to sign a paper proving that your animal won't get a reaction to the vaccine, they're not going to do that. So you say, well, how about if I bring in titer proof instead? And they're usually very happy about that.
Or you can also sign something saying that you won't hold them responsible if your dog gets sick at the kennel. And the other thing about that, which is interesting, is I lectured for the American Kennel Association maybe a decade ago, and they paid attention to my newsletter after that. Might have even been longer than that. And at some point I said, I don't recommend kennels. I recommend you get a pet sitter. Pet sitter, pet sitter, pet sitter. And I got this really strongly worded letter from the American Kennel Association president saying, you lectured for us. How can you be saying that you shouldn't go to a kennel? And I wrote back and I said, because of vaccinations. You guys require vaccines. I don't think vaccines are good. And he said, but we don't. We recommend, our requirements say, do what the veterinarian requires. So in actuality, you can point, you can say, look, the American Boarding Kennel Association, ABKA, that's it. The American Boarding Kennel Association actually says you're supposed to do what my vet says. So that's another way around that one without even having to do a titer. Remember, titers, drawing blood, looking for the antibodies in the bloodstream. Do not think of titers as a replacement for annual vaccines. Don't let your veterinarian talk you into doing annual titers. You're wasting your money. And frankly, if you have a kennel, unless your dog loves to go to the kennel or your cat happens to love to go to a kennel, if you do, get a pet sitter. It's just so much better anyway, again, unless they just love it. And if they don't go to one that makes you do a titer. I mean, if you can do that instead of a vaccine, fine. But try to find one that's like on the same page as you are. There are people that are on the same page. And speaking of pages, at the Pet, whatever I said it was, the Pet Welfare Alliance. At the Pet Welfare Alliance website, they have a list for about 8 countries. They have the flags of maybe 10 countries up on their website with a list of veterinarians that ascribe to not vaccinating. And you and I are there, Jeff. Whether you knew it or not, you're there. And so it does have some, I think Portugal had one. They didn't have any for Spain or France. And I'm having a little, I just started a dialogue with them this morning about some of their criteria. They say you have to use VaxiCheck. Well, why not another way of doing titer? You shouldn't limit it just to VaxiCheck. So I don't know what they'll say to that. But just in terms of finding holistic or open-minded veterinarians, that's another source for you to find open-minded veterinarians. So that's Pet Welfare Alliance. Now, what Rosemary Manziano did, she's a veterinarian in New Jersey, Freehold, New Jersey, homeopathic veterinarian. And I think, and again, I don't have my notes from the conference in paper, so I can't tell you exactly on this, but she had her clients over like a 10-year period, expose puppies, the people that were interested in doing it this way, to not do any puppy vaccines at all, and instead expose them. She knew of an area, it's hard to expose to distemper. She knew of an area where there were raccoons with distemper. And so she would have people take their puppies there and take them into the field for like 2 minutes the first time, run around on the ground for 2 minutes and come home. The next week, 4 minutes. The next week, 6 minutes. The next week, 10 minutes. And then she would do titer tests a few weeks later and see if they had adequate titers. And they did. And she'd have them go to a dog park where there was likely to be parvo, and they all came back with adequate parvo titers. Now, is it going to those places that really is doing it, or is it simply picking it up in other places in the environment? We don't know. You'd have to have dogs in a sterile environment, take them to the dog park for 5 minutes and bring them back again to the sterile environment to be able to say that. So I can't say that it's because of that. But what I can say is here's a veterinarian who has 100% of the puppies in her care who expose themselves this way and were not vaccinated. 100% of them have adequate antibody titers. So that's great. Again, I didn't finish, I think, what I was saying, which is once you've gotten a positive antibody titer, you do not need to repeat it because you've got cell-mediated immunity, which is also generated, but you can't measure it easily. So even if the titer drops, you don't need to repeat the vaccinations. So except for in lieu of a vaccination, there's no need to repeat the titers. They're protected. And those of you who are not vaccinating, not using chemicals and frontline and all of that, feeding a good diet, doing Reiki every day on your animals, things like that, they're going to be so healthy that their natural immune system will protect them. So I'm so excited about hearing more about that study. Do you remember anything more, Jeff, about it? I did not read
the study, but I can think of one very good reason to run titers, even though I never recommend them on an annual basis. And it's the only reason that I do recommend them is if they are going to be allowed in place.
Is there what, Jeff?
Sorry, can you?
Yeah, we forget to unplug our phone, don't we? I did too.
You know, it's all about the quality of life of the individual. So if they're not going to be able to go to dog class.
Right, I said if they need it in lieu of vaccine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Like Dr. Corey is trying to call in. We only have a few minutes left. So Dr. Corey, if you want to put in the chat what you would like to talk about, and we'll see if we...
And tell us who Dr. Corey is, Jeff.
I just... Right now,
okay.
His picture popped up. Okay, so he's... No.
Oh, no. It's advertising himself. Okay, so did you have another topic, or shall I do a case from the 2000 conference, AVH conference?
Just give me one sec here, because I'm not sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a question. How do you get titers? Titers are done by drawing blood. A veterinarian has to draw the blood. And then there are some tests where, like, you do it like the heartworm test or the Lyme test, where they just go on a little disc, or it can be sent away to, particularly Hemopet is the best place to do it. But there are other labs, Cornell and I think Michigan or Kansas, but there are a few others out there. And so Jeff prefers sending them out. I don't know. I think it's fine to have them in.
Well, here's my rationale was based on a bunch of experiences where, you know, for example, they did the in-clinic test and it said inadequate titer with either plus or minus. And when they sent out the lab to, in this case, Cornell, they were able to actually measure titer and say, no, it's fine. So,
oh, okay. So it said it was not good, and sending it to, and which one was that? Do you remember which company?
That was actually the in-clinic test, but that's what Antec does.
But which one? There are two different ones. There's Gene Dodds, and then there's the other one.
Switch over to the AccuCheck test. Symbiotics.
Okay.
I'm not sure. All I know is that that's what they're doing there in the lab. So yeah, I'm trying to avoid sending it there, but even though it's a good screen, either that in clinic or to send it out for a general screen. But that's like a Lyme test. You get people get positive Lyme tests, and I say, "Oh no, my dog has Lyme disease."
And that's a good sign. Yay, they're building antibodies.
Right. And I would say, great, he's getting an antibody response against exposure.
Right.
So,
so how often you should do the titers, we basically said, which is do it once, and that's it, period, unless you're told in order to do what you want to do, you got to be vaccinated. Do I really? Would you accept a titer? Oh, yes, we'll accept a titer. That's the second reason to do titers. So know that they've made an antibody response, that they have a competent immune system, and after either vaccination or exposure or just general life, they have developed an immunity. That's number one. And we don't do that for ourselves or for our children, of course. So, and then the second is if it will let you do something that would be fun with your dog. And if it does change over time, if it goes down, the problem is people who are doing titers every year, if it goes down, then people vaccinate. But they don't need to because there's cell-mediated immunity. So even if it goes to 0, it doesn't matter. You still don't need to revaccinate. Jeff, any idea? Oh, you asked. Okay, you obviously don't know. Human animal care versus wild animal care. I think maybe that's pets versus wild animals. And the wonderful thing about homeopathy is homeopathy excellent for treating wild animals. Shirley Casey from Colorado is absolutely wonderful. And she's been doing homeopathy workshops for treating wild animals for years. Think about a bird who's crashed into a building, into a glass window. A dose of arnica can absolutely turn them around. They might need nat salt for another head injury remedy. It's wonderful because it can be dosed on their feet, on their beaks or on their talons. It can be put into food. So for wild animals, homeopathy is wonderful. And also, I keep talking about Reiki, and Reiki, because it can be done from a distance, a slight distance or a long distance, is just a miraculous way to treat both pets and wild animals. And our discussions about diet, most zoos, for instance, are using prey-appropriate diet as opposed to a commercially based, use up our discarded human products diet as our dog and cat ones. So, and then also so doing telepathic Reiki, if you do telepathic Reiki, Dr. Corey, then I would encourage you to look at the website. Let's see, it's Sarah, Shelter Animal Reiki Alliance. Association, thanks. I always hesitate on that. Which one is it? Association. And they have a group of people, volunteers all over the country, who go to shelters and do Reiki in shelters. And of course, that changes the emotional state of the animals, making them much more adoptable. So that's a way that you could even do it from home. You wouldn't need to even go to the shelter, but get the names of shelters you want to be sending Reiki to and just start sending Reiki. And it'd be wonderful. Or if you hear on the internet about wild animals are in a forest fire, or people are, there's been a bunch of wild animals injured, things like that, then you want to send Reiki. Every time you hear of a disaster, send Reiki. And you teach it, which is wonderful. So and do you teach it only in person-to-person classes, or do you teach it, do you do long-distance classes where you do it like online or something like that? There are places that do that. I recommend you find a Reiki master, a Reiki teacher who can teach you locally, because then you're part of a local group. And I think that's an important piece. There is also if you've been attuned with human Reiki, you can attend a class that's held monthly by telephone by Gail, help me, what's her name? Kathleen Prasad. Kathleen Prasad, and she does it, so it's talking about, using Reiki, however you've been attuned, with animals. And we're about out of time.
And yep, we are about out of time, but some great information about vaccination, about heartworm, just
Reiki.
some general sundry information. And yep, we should probably start, keeping track of all the great topics that we talk about and what we want to keep talking about. A few questions were submitted by Facebook in advance. We'll definitely get to those next week. Yep.
Oh, okay. We should do those first, Jeff.
Yep, for sure. So thank you everyone for coming. We're here. I'm Dr. Jeff Hyman with Dr. Christina Chambreau and Gail Pope. We're here every week, Thursday at 1, to help support your holistic journey. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I am also put there, it's my sign up. If you want to join my sign up list, you'll get advance notice of any things that we're doing. Christina, you have one as well, I'm sure.
Jeff's always good at getting the notices out, so sign up for Jeff's list. And Paulina, even though you came on late, you can listen to this whole thing. It's all most of them are saved. So just come back into it, and hopefully it'll be there. So even though you missed it, you can hear it.
Excellent. So thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Corey, for coming, and feel free to let us know if there's anything you want to talk about for next week. Thanks. Bye, everyone. Enjoy the day.
Yeah.